Solid. All right, well, welcome to all of you. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you may be. We have a number of time zones represented here. I'm very grateful to all of you for taking the time to meet with us today. This is a pretty important function for the RVP network. We periodically bring together a group of our advisors, board members, participants in some of our activities, and additional guests to assemble some serious wattage, some brain power for thinking through the current work, but most especially the upcoming possibilities for themes for our ongoing work. And we've done this, I'm not sure how many times now, but certainly four or five times over the last 15 years. It's always been very helpful for us to hear from you, to pick your brains, to benefit from the collected wisdom and discernment and insight that you all bring with your generous contributions to our organization. And that also goes for events that we do here at Catholic University through the George McLean Center. Some of you know Father McLean, who was the founder of the international organization, the Council for Research in Values and Philosophy. Others of you have joined activities of that group around the world at various times. And we do continue to try to incorporate some of the key themes and insights from George McLean into our ongoing work. Obviously, he had a special concern with the nature and the importance and the significance and the diversity of the cultures around the world that shape philosophical investigation, that shape religious inquiry and religious practice, that exert a significant sociological influence on different societies around the world. He was also very deeply interested in the person and in some of the most essential features of humanity. Those are questions that remain at the heart of what we do, and I think those are themes that all of you have worked with in various capacities and are all experts in. So we have an assembly of folks in the humanities and social sciences here. We have a number of different disciplines represented, but I would say that a common feature of this advisory panel is that people are able to cross boundaries, think in interdisciplinary ways, and delve deeply into questions concerning the humanum. So what we'll do today is we'll have some brief updates about the work of the council. We'll go around very quickly right now and just do a quick round of introductions. I guess I'll just ask each of you to say a little bit about, just give us your scholarly location, and then tell us either something that you're working on right now or something that you're passionate about. And I say that because José wrote to me this morning and said that he's obsessed with the situation in Ukraine right now, and that may be something which has pushed other kinds of concerns, including academic concerns, into the background. We will start with our most senior member. So Charles, can you just briefly say a word about what is preoccupying you these days?
Well, I mean, certainly Ukraine is also preoccupying me, but the thing that I'm sort of working on is the issue of ethics. By that, I mean, do we need to go back to Plato and start again and think of our morals, not simply in terms of what you shouldn't do? I mean, we have various charters of that, starting with the Ten Commandments, and more recently, the Declaration on Human Rights of 48. But do we have to mix into our understanding of human ethical life the ways in which humans can lead a really fulfilled life and or fail to do that. Being able to, as it were, that would Plato would say, yeah, outlining the human life form. And I think we do, and I think that we have a constitutional emphasis or a tendency in the modern world to shy away from that because it's an area where we can only talk in metaphors, and that for a lot of people totally kills the legitimacy of an area. But I think it's very much worth exploring.
All right, back to the drawing board on ethics. Then great. I'm just going to go down the list of participants as I have it on my screen, and actually I should start with myself. Bill Barbieri, for those of you whom I haven't met in person before. I'm at the Catholic University of America in DC, and currently helping lead, along with the redoubtable Hu Yaping, the McLean Center here on campus. And my own project right now is also in ethics, which is my field, but it's looking at ecological thinking and exploring questions about ways in which ecology can inform both the descriptive and normative tasks in ethics. I call the project Moral Ecology, which is I think a very multivalent formulation. Hans, you're up next on my list. Can you tell us what you're up to these days?
Yes, most of you will know I am the so-called Ernst Welch Professor for the Sociology of Religion at Humboldt University in Berlin. And I've also been teaching at the University of Chicago for more than 20 years, although this has been difficult in the last years because of the pandemic. Because of the pandemic on the one hand, and because of the health condition of my wife on the other hand. Now, with regard to my work, I published a new book last year in German under the title, if I say it in English, Why the Church? So not what is the church good for, but why did Christianity develop a kind of institution that you do not really find in other religious traditions, and why is it important to remind us of that fact for the present discussions about church reform. But my main project is a book on the global history of moral universalism. But I don't think I should say more about that at the moment, because that would take time.
I'm sorry, I muted myself there. Thank you very much, Hans. I was just saying that the title, The Global History of Moral Universalism, sounds mildly ambitious. And
it's not the title, it's an attempt to specify what the topic is.
Right. Very good. Okay, Bob, I have you up next.
Well, thank you. I'm very glad to be part of this. I suspect that I'm the only Protestant to be part of this. I may be mistaken about that, but I've been functioning as part of
Craig just raised his hand.
for what, 20 years. I first went with the group, including both Bill and Hu, to China, and we trooped around from Beijing to Xinjiang province. So as to what I'm working on now, I think probably the most important thing is one that I mentioned in my remarks to you in advance. That is how to negotiate between our sense of global identity, which we have worked out here, and our sense that each culture needs to go its own way, and needs to recover itself. We need to have more languages rather than fewer, and so forth. So that's a big task that I think we could spend some time on. Thank you.
Are you working on a specific book on that topic right now?
No, I'm not. I'm just worrying about all those issues.
Very good.
I have a book that may well come out soon. It's at a publisher's now that deals with many parts of that, but I have not been able to put it together. So
great. All right. Good to hear. Craig, welcome. We're just going around and doing a quick set of introductions and describing something that is preoccupying or even in some cases obsessing us right now. Tomas, I have you up next.
Okay, so I'm professor for sociology of religion and philosophy of religion at Charles University in Prague. I've got quite a good echo on my last book, The Afternoon of Christianity, which was published in 5 languages last year, and there will be another 5 languages in this year. And I'm very moved that a lady, she's working on it in Ukraine, is working in the bunker with 3 children. And so the Ukraine is also a part of my heart. And now I'm very involved in this synodality process. There will be in 2 weeks a meeting of the European bishops, the final step of this continental phase of the synodality process. It will be in Prague, and I was invited to give a lecture at the very beginning of this meeting of hundreds and hundreds of bishops. So I'm working day and night on this to say something in 30 minutes essential for the synodality process.
Very good. You're a path blazer for the future of Christianity. Let's see. Tony, I have you next on my screen.
Thanks, Bill. Everybody, I'm in transition at the moment to move to Spain. So I'm going to move from the north of England, where I'm at the moment, to work in southern Spain. So that's a kind of punctual thing that's going on. In terms of writing, I think I'm interested at the moment in, I'm working on a book on the history of philosophy based on Copleston's 11-volume thing. They've asked me to kind of do one rather large sort of volume of that. So I suppose the question I've got is the role of philosophy in the contemporary conversation about matters of ethics, transcendence, social issues, and so on. And within that, the place of God in the conversation.
Very good. Thanks. Let's see. My screen just shifted, but Craig, welcome, and just tell us a word about your current concerns and projects.
Thanks, Bill, and apologies for getting on slightly late. I'm, as always, drawn into too many different projects, but the big anchoring themes for me at the moment are working on a book notionally entitled Cosmopolitanism and Belonging that is organized around the tensions between 2 different ideas of cosmopolitanism, one of universal order and the other of an embrace of heterogeneity. So we speak of cosmopolitan cities, and we mean something about difference and confrontations with difference. We speak about a cosmopolitan ethics and the ideology of human rights or something, and have very different notions of that. But I'm interested in how each of these relates to the existence or formation or decay of strong senses of belonging in solidarity with others in place-based communities especially, but also in nations and in other kinds of solidarities. So I continue to worry about various aspects of that, right? What amount to small studies of pieces of the larger canvas, and try to bring it together. Related to that, are a couple of subsidiary themes I mentioned. One of them is the marginalization of traditions of more or less organicist thought without replacement of them, as evidenced by the fact that it's hard to find in many settings, not less hard in parts of Catholic social thought than others, but heirs to a conservative tradition which has been replaced by various kinds of, if you will, rightism that are not conservative, radical rights that are neoliberal or libertarian or simply disruptive. And I'm drawing on a variety of older traditions of trying to think the whole and order, and questions of hierarchy and transcendence in relationship to the pervasive individualism. Finally, demonstrating that I'm working on too many things at once, I'm trying to work on these things while also working on transformations and thinkings about the human as such, including those entailed by artificial intelligence and other constructs, but artificial intelligence not simply conceptualized as we could make artificial human beings, which I think is a specious notion, but gene editing, artificial intelligence, other technologies that change what it means to be human, and change it partly by changing how we are connected and embedded in very large scale systems that work partially autonomously of our choices.
Great. You are busy these days. And this piece about organicist thought, are you tempted to revive the banner of communitarianism at this point?
I'm not much interested in the banner, but yes, I mean, the idea of community is central to this. The liberalism versus communitarianism debates of the days when I was a graduate student and young faculty member aren't particularly what I want to go back to, and seem to me not to have wound up being as illuminating as I would hope. But sources for this are people who get both labeled correctly and incorrectly labeled communitarianisms, like Chuck Taylor, who's on this call, right? Well, I'm going to guess Chuck recognizes himself in the assertion that he's communitarian and doesn't want to be contained by that label, doesn't want to see it sharply opposed to liberal, and doesn't want to take on all the baggage that goes with it. And ditto Michael Sandel and a variety of others
Fair
this
enough.
discussion. Right.
All right, great. Thanks. I have Gail up next. How are you, Gail?
Hi, doing well. Well, my recent project, it's just off to the press, so I can't fix any typos anymore, is my book on H. Adara Aruka, Pursuing Justice in Africa. So that's a book, some of you know, I've been working on it for a lot of years, but finally it's coming out with Bloomsbury. And of course, Aruka is somebody who cared about rich-poor dichotomy, neo-colonialism. He also had big concerns for the environment. So I have a chapter on environment in there. And as for my own work, I've been doing more work on the environment lately, both, conference papers having to do with those issues. And at my university, this is the 4th year now, I'm co-chair for a big environmental conference we have on campus. We had 400 attendees last fall, 30 concurrent sessions, but it's all about regional responses to environment, to water rights, food sovereignty, all those issues, and it involves a lot of the community. So it's an effort to join, the university with the surrounding grassroots community organizers. And so I've been heading that, and my university, which is a Jesuit university, and Sisters of Mercy, University of Detroit Mercy, we're part of this 7-year Laudato Si challenge, trying to see how we can really enact as an institution some of the values in Laudato Si. And my other big interest is immigration issues. I've gone to the border recently with Sisters of Mercy, and concern about the rights of people to seek asylum, concern about how climate change is driving a lot of migration. And so some of my recent work has been on those topics.
Great. Town, gown, and ground relations, I guess, one way to think of it. Good. Let's see, Joao, you're next in my list.
Sorry. Hello to everyone. Good to see you all here from Rome, the Gregorian University, and a special greeting to Charles with very vivid memories of the last visit here in the Eternal City. So I hope your return was nice and safe. And yes, what I can say about what is going on is, well, I would say, even without hearing from his mouth, but I am also one of those who is deeply obsessed with the issue of war in Ukraine. For me, it's an existential problem. It is my problem. It is our problem, and it really takes a significant part of my energy in trying to, on the one hand, follow what is happening, and on the other hand, trying to make sense of this absurdity. Therefore, my intellectual interests have been shifted strongly since the last 2 years, but particularly in the last year, to issues of international law, to issues of justice, international justice, and also to issues of technology, particularly in as much as they are associated to the bad, terrible uses of it. So as being part of the problem and not of the solution. The immediate concern in terms of publication is the book that have been prepared with who, and some of you contributed to it, in memory of our beloved and late friend and advisor here too, Vincent Chen, and a special salute to Johanna at this moment. And so the book is almost ready, it's being finalized, but there are always this issue and the other issue, and it takes time, it takes energy. So I'm very grateful to Hu for all that she's been doing, and all the others that have been helping and be patient with this project. This is my immediate concern. So I cannot rest well until the book is out, which should be in a few, couple of days, maybe 2 or 3 weeks time. Yes. It should be out.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned Vincent Chen. For those of you who didn't have the pleasure of meeting him, he was a very important and influential member of the leadership for RVP for many years. And many of his ideas, I think, continue to animate his work. And we're especially pleased to have Johanna, his wife, join us. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your current project.
Hello, everybody. I think I'm new. The first time I attend this meeting. Before it was Vincent joined you very open and do a lot of work with Professor Judge McLean. And now, unfortunately, he passed away in 2018. It's 4 years before. Now I'm in Taiwan, although I am a professor emerita from University of Toronto. I'm several part of work. One is my own work. I'm working on in the field of art and aesthetics, or over 40 years, and but around 20 years I worked with I have a international project of art and aesthetics, a collaborative project with a scholar from the École d'Études des Sciences Sociales in Paris, and scholars from Taiwan. And the recent project, we are working on the materiality and the multiculturality in art and aesthetics. And we take materiality and the multiculturality as elements of aesthetics. So this is a part. So recently I'm working two things. One is to rethink what is art in the age of Anthropocene. It means when we're talking about art or the aesthetic experience, it should be beyond the aesthetics from anthropocentrism. So the question is how to stay with, how to find the situation of human being to stay with the nature, so-called self-soul. This one thing. The other things I'm working is the ethic of caring in the age of Anthropocene. And I will use Vincent's theory, general stratification, to think, when we doing the caring event, it's not an individual, between people, or a kind of institutional event. It concerns the existence of the whole human being, or the destiny of the human being, especially when after the pandemic, all the crisis has caused, by the human behaviors in the world, and without concern the other existence. So we will see just, when we're talking about the object is not something exists in front of us to study, to observe, but the mirror thing stay with us. So I'm thinking when we're talking about the caring, you should consider not only caring people, but caring about all the things, including animals, plants, all the things. So rethinking what is the relationship between human being and nature, I think is most important issues when talking about the caring. The other things I'm doing is editing the complete work of Vincent Shen. This is a work now in process in Furen Catholic University in Taiwan. So we have done this project already for 3 years. Next year, we will publish some of his works, and the editing of his work, not only the books, but the old article he has published, but not yet combined in the work. And beside this, we will preparing the recording of his works. I mean, lectures. Mm-hmm. So this is all the things.
No one better to do that than you. You're keeping
it's
his
a group.
legacy. Mm-hmm. Sure.
I'm just I support this project, but this Professor Zhou Mingquan and Chen Deguang and Qiu Jiansuo, they organize. They organize this with so many people, many students, scholars. They support this project. So I hope it could, continue to complete this. I don't know when you will finish.
Great. All right. Thank you. We turn to Jose now. What's on your mind?
Well, there is noise above me. I hope it's not too noisy for you. There are construction workers replacing some windows up the floor above, but right now they are quiet. So I hope it lasts like that. Well, yes, I've been obsessed with Ukraine, but in many different ways. I'm happily retired now, what means that I'm more busy than ever. I am more free to get even into more projects than I was before. Just went to press finally, and this was something that was on my mind, the volume of the project I directed with Peter Fan on Asian Catholicism and Globalization, just went to press, and so this is good. And then I'm co-directing with a colleague, Jocelyn Cesari, a big project on what we call theologies and practice of religious pluralism. Looking first, in the first phase of the project, how all the monotheist religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianities, all Christianities, Protestant, Catholic, and Orthodox, have to come to terms with the increase in religious pluralism, namely how they move from the old nomenclature of true and false religion to what I call denominationalism, in which each religion claims to be unique and particular, and yet also claims to have universal claims for all of humanity. And so how this process of interreligious encounter then takes place. In Volos, we had not only the conference of orthodoxy, but we also had one of the workshops with our group working on orthodoxy and religious pluralism. So we had special workshop. We just developed the project on Judaism. We got so we have working groups on each of the projects. We'll have the working group on Catholicism with Meloni and Peter Fan and others. We'll have a meeting I guess in May. We just had the big workshop on Islam. So this is part of the things I've been involved. As to Ukraine, obviously, it's not only war, it's basically organizing all kinds of responses. I'm organizing Zoom meetings, the next one very soon, on the whole question of, is religious freedom under threat in Ukraine because of the intervention of the government with the all Russian Orthodox Church, or the Ukrainian Orthodox Church still close to the Moscow Patriarchate. And then I'm organizing a big conference on March 2nd at Georgetown on war, transformation of society, peace and reconciliation, and reconstruction. And we hope that something will come out of it. Basically, I've been involved much more in the last years working on orthodoxy. I had never done it before, but it's very clear that the conflict within Ukrainian Orthodoxy, the conflict between Ukrainian and Russian Orthodoxy, and the conflict between the Ecumenical Patriarchate Constantinople and the Moscow Patriarchate are at the center of this war. So it was very clear in Volos that all of global Orthodoxy is very, very concerned, and they don't know what to do and how to react, how to respond. Orthodoxy is interesting because in the last 15 years, if you look at their production, they are going through a kind of aggiornamento. They are really dealing with all kinds of questions the Catholic Church did in the 60s and 70s. But because they don't have a hierarchy, they are dealing with it in all kinds of different directions, from the most, you could say, liberal or accommodating, the most adjourning, to the most fundamentalist reactions against it. And this is what makes it interesting. And I'm looking forward in March. I'll be going to Munich for 3 months to a new institute. And so I'll be working with Hans Joas in May and with others on universalism and particularism. I'm not sure yet which project I will lead there because I'm involved in so many different things that I'm not sure which aspect of it I will be developing there. But so I'm obsessed, but I still have time to do all kinds of things.
Sounds like it. You'll be in Munich for 3 months?
Yes.
Well, I'd love to talk to you another time more about orthodoxy, but just to clarify, the project on religious pluralism, that includes different Christian denominations, but also Judaism and Islam?
Well, the first phase is on the monotheist religions. And
okay.
After we finish, we'll have a phase on the Asian religions.
Okay.
So we have now a three-year phase dealing with, we have on Islams, we call it Islams, Judaisms, Protestantisms, Catholicisms, and Orthodoxies.
Mhm.
So both how they deal with internal pluralism and how they deal with external pluralism.
Got it. Okay, good. Thank you. Joseph, welcome.
First of all, thank you, Bill. I am not going to switch on the video because the signals are not very strong. And when I do that, then it becomes worse.
That's fine.
Yeah. For now, I had a book in 2019, Modernity, Development and Modernity in Africa, which was published in Cologne, Germany. And I am developing themes out of this text for future research. Basically, we are contesting the views on decoloniality, for example, because of its radical nature and rejecting other cultures, especially the colonial heritage. Of course, there are problems with the colonial heritage, and also with the pre-colonial African world. But the challenge is not to is to be able rather to incorporate what we might call progressive elements from these sources and from other global sources to create a new world, an intercultural world, world of hybridity. And for this, we are proposing a different strand of thought, basically a transcoloniality, which is a transcending of the colonial world, pre-colonial world, and creating a new identity. Therefore, we are arguing basically that identities can come from heritage, but it comes more importantly from creations, what people are able to construct, the new worlds that they're able to make, and the new relationships that they are able to create. So on the basis of this, we think it is possible to forge a new form of African hybrid identity and to make this the foundations of future development in different aspects of the world, in different aspects of African culture and life. To this end, therefore, we are also exploring the notions of positive practical justice in contrast to negative practical justice, which is penal and retributive, and all the ways in which it is obstructive. We're thinking of much more positive forms of practical justice that is able to create reconciliations and able to enrich life, not so much by not by retributions, but by encouraging people to develop. They are more social, more social, forgiving, reconciling, creative aspects, so that a new world can emerge. So these are the things that I am exploring in my current and immediate future research work.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's see. Peter, welcome.
That's so sorry. Thanks, Bill. Hello to all of you. I'm Peter Jonkers. Just like José, I'm emeritus of Tilburg University, which, just like José, gives me plenty of time to work on other projects which I can take on or decline myself, which is a great advantage. What I'm doing at the moment is, well, similarly to Charles and Hans and José, working on the issue of the universalism versus particularism of values. I start from you may know this European Value Studies project, which is a big empirical long-term survey into the evolution of values in Europe. What comes out is out of those research is that you have a on the one hand, a universal, almost universal agreement on, so to say, liberal values. But at the other time, on the other hand, you also have a strong stress on particular local values, which are, can you summarize as traditions, etc., etc. Well, that's the starting point, and then I tried to analyze that from a philosophical perspective, using the ideas of Charles and of Thomas Nagel in his essay on the objectivity of values. So for the rest, I'm editing a book of a project which is under the aegis of Tomas on the beliefs and faith and beliefs of unbelievers. That's all papers have been submitted, but it needs some editing work. It will be edited in the late fall of this year by the council. And I'm working on, but that's a more technical thing, which Hans Joas may be interested in a German Jacobi lexicon, which is fun. Okay, that's it for the moment.
Good, thank you. Will.
Hello. So I'm Will Sweet. I am a professor of biomedical ethics and philosophy of law at St. Francis Xavier University in Nova Scotia, Canada. I guess one of the things that's sort of preoccupying me right now in Canada, about 7 years ago, there was a law passed to allow what we call medical aid in dying. It could be assisted suicide or euthanasia. There's a kind of decriminalization of some of these acts. And there's been a lot of discussion about expanding the criteria for medical aid in dying. And that's been a big controversial issue. I gather it's resonated south of the border a bit. So I've been involved in that discussion in Canada quite a bit, both in terms of doing research but also some, let's call it, interventions and reports at the national level, and also teaching this kind of thing. So, talking about that. But when I have a spare moment, some of the things perhaps I would say enjoy much more is I'm still doing some work on intercultural philosophy. I've been doing that for, again, about 10 years or so. There's a book that the council published a number of years ago that I edited on what is intercultural philosophy. I'm trying to get into things like epistemological presuppositions of what's involved in doing that kind of work. So it's not just sort of looking at different cultures and traditions, but trying to figure out what allows the kind of conversation to occur and what happens when there are roadblocks. And this also reflects something that's a little bit close to what Vincent was working on with strangification. And we talked about this a few times. I edited a book a few years ago called Migrating Texts and Traditions. So again, how it is that traditions and texts can migrate from, let's call a place of origin to a place of reception, and what that tells us about the texts. So Vincent and I were talking about this idea about, how do you engage the other and how do you bring the other out? So there's a little bit of that work too, but I'd say maybe fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of the work in biomedical ethics is taking a lot of my time. I think it's very important work. But at times I almost wish I didn't have to do it. So.
Great. Thank you, Will. Yong, welcome to this gathering. Tell us about a project you're working on right now.
Okay, I'm Yong from the philosophy department of Chinese University of Hong Kong. So I'm new to this group. I think first time joining you. Thank you, Bill and Yanping, for inviting me. So I kind of basically try to get familiar with the work you have been doing. Although I have, I think, participated in activities, conferences a couple of times before, sponsored by the council. In terms of the work that I'm doing, since people are talking about, about Ukraine, And actually, our department, the philosophy department of Chinese University of Hong Kong, will organize a conference, in-person conference in Lithuania, together with the University of Vilnius, and focus on this topic. The title of the conference is the philosophy of crisis. So mostly a small-scale conference, mostly people from our department and the people from the philosophy department of their university, and we are going to invite a philosopher, women philosopher, phenomenologist from Ukraine, to be a keynote speaker. So that's maybe directly related to the things, because a number of you mentioned that. In terms of the things that I'm doing myself, I've been since maybe last couple of decades. Initially I have was doing a lot of different things, but for the last 2 decades, I mostly focus on ethics, drawing on Chinese philosophical tradition. I think mostly I think when you're doing focus on Confucianism, doing the issue about virtue ethics. I think on this issue, I had some dialogue with Bob about whether Confucianism is a virtue ethics or not. But that's not the main thing I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is to look at the contemporary discussion of virtue ethics and some criticism of it or its internal difficulties, and then try to see whether we can find some resources in Chinese tradition, especially Confucian traditions, to address such issues, so that to develop virtue ethics, instead try to argue that Confucianism or Taoism is the virtue ethics, but try to use the Chinese resources to respond to some criticisms of virtue ethics, especially from Kantian philosophers. So this is one aspect. I think another aspect I've been doing, I think I'm working on a book project tentatively entitled Ethics of Difference. And this is mostly drawing on Chinese Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi. I'm particularly intrigued by his idea that I summarize in contrast to perhaps it's controversial, but I think I think the Zhuangzi has a lot of interesting things to say. We talk about it golden rule, do unto others as you would like to be done unto. And sometimes it's called silver rule or negative formulation of the golden rule, to not do unto others as you would not like to be done unto. And this is something that Zhuangzi is against. His idea is saying that you should do unto others as they would like to be done unto, and do not do unto others as they would not like to be done unto, right? And of course, there are a lot of if you just look at this formulation, general formulation, a lot of issues, but the text has addressed all these issues. So I think it's very interesting ideas. So I think I have published most chapters so now I of course needed to reorganize them into a book. So ethics of difference. This is what I'm recently trying to do. So maybe just and also I want to mention because I want to apologize because here is I will not be able to with you throughout because it's very late here. And not only that, although I relatively young, I mean compared to many of you, but I still have a COVID here, so a little bit tough. So I will not stay too late with you. Just apologize first if I disappear soon earlier. Then that is the reason.
Understood, and that's fine. And those are the times that we live in. And I thank you for joining us at such a late hour over there. Couple more to go. Karim, tell us about a project you're interested in right now.
Thank you, William, and I'm very happy to be joining all of you today. I'm Karim Crow, and I'm attached to the McLean Center for Culture and Values here in Washington, D.C. I spent almost 20 years in Southeast Asia, primarily Malaysia and Singapore, and I'm in teaching in Islamic studies. And my main concern has been for some years is how to understand intelligence and the modern concept of reason and rationality, and join it to the traditional understanding and practice of it in Muslim societies, and also in general terms across Asia in the past. And I find that this is a key issue for confronting the problem that Muslims are experiencing in making an adequate response to so-called modernity. And a little bit of a theme which resonates with my thought is that of Taha Abdurrahman, a Moroccan philosopher, ethical thinker, who has proposed a reform of modernity based on Islamic principles. But this touches also on the issue of how Muslims understand others and themselves. And I'm also working on several other projects, including ethical issues in contrast with other societies, and education and how to educate for ethics. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome, David. I'm glad you were able to join us. Maybe you can just say a brief word of introduction about where you're based and describe one project that you're interested in working on these days.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Hu, for inviting me, and for yourself as well. I see also Gail Presby, who I've met before. It's nice to be reconnected. So my name is David Kaulem. I'm a lay person, but working at the Jesuit University in Harare in Zimbabwe. I was trained as a philosopher, mainly in ethics. But at the moment, the university has just been, it was a philosophy focusing on training philosophy to Jesuit scholastics. But over the last 3 years, it has acquired the status of a full-fledged university. So I've been asked to develop the faculty of education and leadership. I'm now the dean for that faculty. And that's most of the work that I spent doing. In any case, however, my research has been in ethics and applying it to social and political philosophy in Africa. I'm pretty much interested in how ethics and political theory can contribute to bringing peace to a lot of African, contexts. I'm glad to see that Professor Charles Taylor is here, because I've used some of his ideas on the social imaginary, applying that concept to Africa to find out, what kind of social imaginary is explaining the kinds of challenges that we are facing in Africa, and trying to look at whether we can find possibilities for developing a better society. So I have participated in a book project which I co-edited with one of the professors here, political scientist, on Zimbabwe at 40. So when we reached the 40 years of independence, we're trying to interrogate the values underlying some of the challenges that we have faced. So that's one of the areas that I've been interested in. Thank you very much for inviting me again.
All right. Thank you all. And I don't want to forget Yeping. What is the project that you're most obsessed with right now? You got to unmute yourself.
Can I share something with you?
Yes.
Oh, the share screen. The host this. I can't share.
Oh, you're not the host anymore? Okay, let me make sure that sharing is enabled here. Let's see.
So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm so happy to see all the good friends and all new. And
okay, sharing's enabled. Yeah.
Thank you very much for. Let me see where. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm. There's the seminar. Yep.
Right. So just David mentioning about social imaginary. So this is a seminar theme.
Now
for
we lost it. Did you X out of the seminar description? We just have your screensaver right now.
Oh yeah. News maybe. Do you have it now?
There it is. Yep.
Okay. So as David mentioned, he's working on social imaginary. Actually, Joel and Bill will all work out for the theme for 2023 seminar is precisely on social imaginaries and social transformation. And I think Joel will say more in the second part about the thematic. But for the activities of, in 2023, we have a set of meetings already in place, in person. And you can see basically in June and July, religion and the peace in University Bucharest, and technology and responsibility in Tbilisi, and international intercultural dialogue and transformation of borders in Slovakia, and that's in June. In July, there's two meetings. One is in Furen, Taiwan, on human community and human values. And Tony was there 2013. And also in Vietnam, on human, similar theme on human values. And last night, actually, we had a discussion with Vice Provost from De La Salle University in Philippines. They also want to organize something focusing on Southeast Asia. So that's basically I'm working on. And also we had recently, I just saw the bill. I could stop sharing.
Yeah, I went ahead and pulled it up on my screen here. So I have the, can you see that? Yeah.
Yeah. So then we just recently published some books, and Peter worked with some Chinese scholars. One is from 2018 pre-Congress meeting on crossing boundaries. And the other one is a Shanghai meeting on reciprocity, and with a set of scholars. And the other one, Gail was part of it, is from Ethiopia on the global responses in Africa. Those things, and also we have two books almost final, ready to print. We'll just send it. Was on philosophy as a way of life, and also the meeting, the book Joel mentioned dedicated to Vincent. So that's we have been working for the consultation. I think for this group we started actually in 2009. And George McLean went to New York to meet Charles after the lecture, Charles, and they start talking. And then in November, we had a first meeting here in Washington. And after that, in alternative years, we have either in Washington and in Vienna. But that's basically focusing on the theme, Faith in a Secular Age. And in 2015, George McLean said, oh, we need to reach out to other cultures, well, reach out, refocus our theme on broader rather than faith and secular, etc. So that's why we had a theme on relearning to be human and the meaningfulness of life, and now is philosophy of crossing boundaries and etc. So that's basically it started, and now hopefully we can meet in person again and anywhere when it's possible. Thank you very much and for coming, and Happy New Year. And
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just showing on my screen the descriptions of number one, the annual international seminar that is usually hosted here in Washington, D.C. We're getting close to our 40th year, I think, of running that seminar. And we've just published the theme for this next group of people that we'll bring in August and September, social imaginaries and social transformation, discerning the dynamics of reality. That's the title of the topic for that seminar. And then Yiping just referred to the series of planned conferences that we have for the summer in Romania, Georgia, Slovakia, Taiwan, Vietnam. We are, very broadly speaking, working in a phase for RVP where we are coordinating with the World Congress of Philosophy theme that will organize the conference next year, 2024, in Rome. And so a number of the conferences that we have supported have already in some way built on this idea of crossing boundaries. Several of the members of RVP are represented in the planning commission, the FISP board, the body that plans the World Congress of Philosophy. And Peter, you mentioned to me in an email that the very broad theme of crossing boundaries has been further specified in a few different ways. Can you briefly describe what the sub-themes are, I guess, of the organizing motif for the Congress?
My pleasure. Wait a sec. I have to get it. So originally, but that's just for memory, the conference was planned in 2023 in Melbourne, but for a variety of reasons that didn't materialize. So the steering committee decided to postpone it till 2024 and to have it in Rome. And by now, well, as Joe knows, I mean, Italians are good at improvising, but pretty bad at a planned organization. But by now there is a first circular letter which mentions the central theme, which is indeed philosophy cross boundaries. By the way, it will take place in the first week of August 2024. So what has been decided is you have, so to say, several spheres. One is devoted to persons, and the plenary session is embodiments. I won't mention all the symposia. The second sphere is on transitions, and the plenary session is on vulnerability and knowledge. The third one is on justice, with a plenary session on citizenship, care, and self-determination. The fourth one is on Earth, living in a sustainable world. And the final one, the last one, is infinity, devoted with the plenary session on emptiness and experience. And as always, there are a host of host of sections devoted to all kinds of topics in sub-disciplines of philosophy. A total of 89 topics. So everyone who is an interest in philosophy will find a section in which he or she can present a paper. That's it for the time being. We will meet one of the final meetings before the actual Congress by the end of May in Japan. I'll be going there, but that's how things are. But it's, as you can imagine, it's a huge organization. And my proposal was to, since RVP has a long and very valuable tradition of working interdisciplinary, of working interdisciplinary, but also internationally, to select one of these themes or sub-themes to work on and to organize a symposium at the World Conference. But that's my idea or suggestion. Of course, it's up to all of us to decide about that.
Yes, indeed. That is certainly one of the purposes for this session today. So RVP generally does organize a pre-conference, fairly sizable conference in conjunction with the World Congress that takes place in the week or so before, and we will be doing that again this time, and we'll rely in part on your suggestions and the case that emerges here for common themes that are bubbling up in the very diverse perspectives that we have represented here.
Fortunately, I'm not the only one from RVP who is member of steering committee. Zhao and Joseph are members too. If I don't think that I forgot one of the, and of course, Will used to be a member, and I don't doubt he's still very influential. So we have a team to prepare things, which is helpful, of course, and well, depends on time available, who can make things going, but we don't need to discuss it now. But it's just to be sure that fortunately, I'm not the only one from RVP who's on the steering committee.
Well, I'm certainly going to recruit Will to help inform the sessions on comparative philosophy and intercultural philosophy that I'll be involved with there. So here's how I'd like to proceed at this point. I had put out a couple of provisional topics that we've been thinking about. One of them, the one that has to do with what we called the hermeneutics of religious change, that is related to a funded project, a grant that we received and have been working on the last couple of years that revolves around Muslim, Christian, Jewish dialogue as thematized in connection with this question of change or evolution of principal teachings in these different traditions. That is something that I do think intersects with some of the interests and preoccupations that some of you have mentioned, but there are other themes as well that have struck me through the talking points that a number of you submitted in advance, and I'd like to open up a discussion for now about this question of the hermeneutics of change in traditions. Doesn't have to be exclusively religious traditions, but any well-organized or systematized ethical tradition that is coping with issues of, for example, modernization or reform under the conditions of modernity. We're gonna talk about that a little bit and then take a break, and then a theme that has struck me in a number of your comments and concerns has to do with the stresses and forces that are arrayed against diversity, against cultural diversity. And these can be forces of globalization. Craig talked about the marginalization of traditions by contemporary social thought. Others of you expressed concern, Bob, for example, about retaining the challenge, the struggle to retain cultural and even linguistic diversity. And so I'd like to devote a discussion after the break to this question of preserving diversity, cultural and otherwise, against various kinds of pressures and threats. And then the other topic that I hope we'll be able to spend some time with is this question of war, of the implications of the conflict in Ukraine for the work of philosophy, of religious studies, theology, work in the humanities and social sciences. Will identified as one of his talking points the idea of friends and enemies, and thinking about who our friends are and who are being demonized currently. And so there's a set of questions there which I'd be very grateful to have you help us further clarify and formulate. But let me, for the time being, I want to start with this question of what I'm calling hermeneutics of change. That might not be the best way of putting it. I want to quote just a little bit from a prompt that we used for the initial meeting of the small community of Muslim, Christian, Jewish scholars that we're forming here and hope to expand upon in a couple of coming conferences. This is just a partial quote. Religions today inhabit a world that's been described as experiencing a continuous acceleration of social change in which ongoing scientific and technological developments persistently alter the fabric of daily life, in which powerful tides of modernization and secularization erode traditional outlooks and practices, and forces of globalization thrust communities and cultures into ever greater proximity and potential conflict with one another. These conditions are providing a stress test for the abilities of religious traditions to cope with rapid systemic change. And they raise a profound, yet to my mind anyway, insufficiently explored question. What effective practices and resources do religions have, singly and collectively, for adapting themselves to the challenge of changing times and maintaining their viability while retaining their integrity? In actuality, major religious traditions, such as the Abrahamic faiths, have long negotiated the delicate historical task of shifting, adjusting their teachings and practices to meet new conditions while preserving core commitments and rights. That's an essential function of tradition, really. Rarely, however, have they made explicit the principles and mechanisms informing this process. This gives rise to the following queries. How, in general, should we characterize the approach of our traditions to religious change? Is this process self-conscious? Is it historically critical? To what extent does one's tradition engage with the issue of how to respond to, for example, secular modernity? How does a tradition identify which sorts of historical developments require a response and which do not? What models of response, for example, resistance, reform, dialectic, or transformation, does your tradition employ? What internal categories and concepts has it developed for thinking about and responding to a rapidly changing world? What resources do traditions have, does a given tradition have, for dealing with the specific historical shifts associated with, number one, the mutual encounter of world religions, number two, secularization, Number 3, scientific advancements, new technologies, and ecological crisis. Those are the subcategories that we've been using to organize our dialogue. To what extent might it confront the issue of historical resilience? To what extent might a given tradition confront the issue of historical resilience in concert with, rather than in competition with, other religious communities? And we had a couple of additional questions or terms that Tomas Halik suggested when he raised some issues at an earlier consultation about these kinds of questions. For example, is it useful to think in terms analogous to the classical axial age, and think in terms of a new axial age that religious traditions are confronting? So that's a way of laying out, one way of formulating a set of concerns around change in religious traditions. It's clear that religious traditions evolve, and sometimes they go through crises, to use a term that Yong mentioned. Sometimes they go through more gradual phases of reform and adjustment. But from a scholarly perspective, are there generalities, regularities that we can identify in that process? I confess that my own thinking about this kind of question is shaped in part by working in a Catholic university that is in a community that is in many ways trying to work out the legacy of Vatican II, which was a central event in that tradition that was designed specifically to think through the challenges of adjusting this global tradition to modern conditions. And there were tools developed within Catholic discourse. For example, the idea of signs of the times, of reading the signs of the times, a biblical motif that was taken and applied to this task of assessing the need for and thinking through the ramifications of adjustments to the contemporary age. And it strikes me that to a greater or lesser extent, there are analogous discussions and processes of more or less self-consciously taking on the challenge of change. José, you mentioned that the project that you're working on is focused specifically on pluralisms, but both on pluralism within traditions and in the fact of religious pluralism. But I take it that part of what your group is doing is investigating the process of adaptation to pluralism. Does that do you see that that work that you're doing as intersecting with the question that I'm trying to formulate here?
Yes, of course, but I'm less and less focused. I mean, this is the question we've been asking for 60 years, since the 60s, since the first discussion of modernity and secularization. And I think it's time to go beyond this question. Our global challenges are such, we should stop talking of secular modernity and talk about really the challenge of our global age. COVID has made clear the inability to deal with the problem of social inequality, the problem of immigrations, I mean, ecological issues, and now the war, that our world system, the secular world system, governance, both the world system of nation states and the world capitalist system have no response and cannot address any of our global challenges. It has been demonstrated for the last 10 years. And we fool ourselves if we still think that the question is how religion adapts to this global order of the nation state and of capitalism. The real question is how much the world religions still have something there to work towards a new type of global civil society that can offer new models of governance beyond the two main systems. So this is for me the question. I think we have to stop asking the question of how religions adapt to these changes and begin asking how simply we are really going to head on to a catastrophe unless we challenge the two main, the world capitalist system and the system of nation states. They've proved unable to answer any of these global challenges. And so, I mean, we can still go on to see how we can reform religions and how they can adapt to it. But I'm less interested in this question, really.
Fair enough. It's clear what you feel the question shouldn't be, how do religions adapt or cope or even survive. Could you say again, give one more shot at formulating the positive question that you think we should be looking at?
The positive question is we need a system of global institutionalization of a global civil society in which both world religions, but also all kinds of secular transnational structures can really create something that can help address those issues in a way which neither the system of nation state. It was very clear the near reflex reaction after COVID to close the borders. In Europe to close the borders. I was in Prague with Tomas Halik. I was stuck there because Europe closed all its borders and all the airlines decided not to fly to any other country. And this is the reaction we have, is the national security doctrine. And even within the European Union, we went back to the old nation state. And so my question is, unless we really think systematically of creating, institutionalizing a global civil society that can serve as a counterpart to create the structures of solidarity, of how to rethink precisely values, moral values across societies, crossing boundaries exactly. And so this is one of the questions. So I don't know whether in positive terms is how religions can today serve to institutionalize new values, new doctrines, new structures, new solidarities, new interactions at the global level.
Okay, thank you.
It goes beyond what we were planning for the meeting, but I want to push it on as something that we have to take seriously.
Very good. I'm going to open the floor, but Charles, since we have you here, let me ask you. We had a meeting last year where we talked about a short essay, part of a larger piece that you've been working on about ethical change. And I wonder, just off the top of your head, what thoughts you have about this question and about comments on José's response.
Well, yes, I think that what we are always thinking in relation to, without thematizing it, is this fact of, I want to say, moral and ethical change. By moral, I mean the rules that tell us what to do and what not to do. Things like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are sort of moral charters, and then the ethical ones, which I think are an essential part of the mix, because they enable certain moral changes to take place when the developments occur. And I think that the whole background to our thinking is our perceiving some kind of movement across history, though it's very hard to get the details straight. I mean, there is something very important happened in the 18th century, and Hans has a very important book on that. I think it's about the sacralization of the human person, but I've forgotten if that's the title of the book. But in which you see phenomena like the sudden turn to abolitionism. For centuries, everyone thought, well, slavery isn't very nice, it doesn't really fit very well, but what can you do? You can't do without it. And suddenly we turned around and said, get rid of it. I mean, the movements got stronger and stronger. And at the same time, you have these movements in the 18th century against, you might say, unnatural and cruel punishments and so on. So it's working. I see us in the present age as working with and against. We're working with what we could discern, going right back to the axial era, but if you like, different forms of axiality, working with against very powerful forces of resistance, which José mentioned some. I mean, certainly the world capitalist system, but it's not so much the world system of states, though that's important. It's also very powerful forces working in reaction against what they see as the aggiornamenti, I'm putting it in the plural, of different religions, which they see as a betrayal. So there's very powerful forces in Christendom that see it this way, and their Islam, it doesn't need further stressing, because it's the reaction, panic reaction against these, which brings on the most violent forms of the lesser jihad. I mean, jihad using arms, right? And so it's a very, very complex picture in which the roles of religion are not necessarily ultimately deciding, but could be ultimately deciding. But they're never going to be involving whole communities behind one or other recognized religious denomination, because they're all split and they all have people on the, you might say, the wrong side, the side which is stopping us from making the moves that José was talking about. That is the move towards international civil society. Things like Greta Thunberg's movement are part of international civil society. They're drawing people from all these different regions to work together, and we need more and more of those. And they will be, by the nature of things, a lot of them will be animated by the forces of aggiornamento in all the different religious groups. But we'll be lining up against the forces of reaction against that.
Thank you. So are you suggesting that to some extent religious traditions have been colonized by some of the forms of political polarization that come from national and even global political systems?
I mean, one of the most, there's a very powerful movement, not in all, but in many, and in some cases extremely powerful movements against these moves we think of as aggiornamento, because they're seen as a kind of betrayal of the real religious tradition. Right? And so a lot of what goes today under the name conservatism in various parts of the world, particularly in the United States, represents that kind of reaction. But you also see, as I said, in the Islamic world, really horrifying forms of reaction. So it's in other words, aggiornamenti don't just go without saying that we've got Vatican II. Oh, great! So the whole Catholic Church has moved. No, it hasn't. That we have some very, very advanced and profound thinkers of world ethics in the Muslim world, particularly in the Sufi tradition in places like Senegal, etc. Great, but there's also the opposite, that we have the wonderful richness of the Gandhian tradition in Hinduism, which is now being thrashed to pieces by this awful movement of the BJP and so on. I think this is the line of opposition, of battle. Mm-hmm. And it makes it all the more important that we have if you like, a ecumenical alliance. Let's take the different Abrahamic religions. We have some kind of ecumenical alliance between those in those traditions who really see what the possible future of the human beings can be, against all the forces that are trying to stop this happening.
Okay, I want to extend a welcome to Catherine Cornille, who's just joined us from Boston. after another meeting earlier this morning. Thank you for taking the time. Is there, we went around, did a little icebreaker. Is there one single project, Catherine, that you're working on that you would like us to know about, that represents an intellectual preoccupation of yours?
I have several, but
just pick one.
Okay. So I'll pick 1.5.
Okay, fair enough.
So the one that I'm working on presently mostly is sort of rethinking the notion of religious particularity, not as an a priori category, but in dialogue or in relation to other religious traditions. So rethinking notions of uniqueness and particularity is sort of the theological project that I have been working on for a while. But something that may be more interesting for you philosophers is sort of the question of interreligious empathy is something that I've been interested in also for a long time and have published some things on. So the limits and possibilities of real deep empathic understanding of the religious other.
Good, thank you. That overlaps with the theme that Johanna mentioned regarding her work on caring and its connection to aesthetics. Hans, can I ask for your thoughts on this issue that we've just been talking about? Charles mentioned the historical sacralization of the human person, something you've written and given a lot of thought about too. But what are we falsely formulating the real questions here?
Maybe 3 brief points. The first is I clearly agree with José that the topic of, or let's say, religion in modernity or modernization of religion is kind of obsolete. And in my eyes, the reason for that is that I have more and more the feeling that the whole concept of modernity is so unclear, both with regard to the chronological dimension and with regard to the normative dimension, that we can talk about this forever, so to speak, without making real progress. So I sometimes suggest that instead of talking about modernity, we make very clear about which phase in history, which moment in history, in which region of the world, and with regard to which normative viewpoints we talk. Otherwise, we talk past each other. So in that sense, I agree with José. That was the first point. Second point, where I think I do not fully agree with José, is this perspective that somehow we have to get beyond the nation state. And that in order to solve the global problems, the most important thing is to get beyond the nation state.
I never use the word beyond. I never use the word beyond.
Well, but what, yeah, how would you phrase your position then?
To create additional structures, a global civil society that serves as a counterpart. I'm not saying that we can go beyond capitalism or beyond the nation state, but we need to institutionalize transnational global civil society.
Yeah, but civil society as such cannot be the solution, I think. I mean, we have to talk about the state level itself, not just about civil societies that may be an important factor in opposition to existing states, but we have to talk about the level of the states themselves. And I got the impression that you would like to go beyond the nation state, because I know that you have, I'm explaining why I got this impression. Because you seem to have an extremely positive evaluation of the European unification process as one step in this direction. Otherwise, I wouldn't understand why in your last contribution, you said, for example, that even in the European Union, they are going back to the nation state, they closed borders during the pandemic and so on. So I may have misunderstood that, But I read this statement as saying the European Union is a very positive step, not necessarily beyond the nation state, but also not just a form of coordination of the behavior of nation state, but something more. And what I would like to say is I'm not so sure that there is such a connection between the global character of the problems we are facing and this form of dealing with these problems. But that is of course a huge topic, but let me just put it on the table. And the third point is, and that I think is very much in harmony with what Charles said. I would say, for example, so not, what was the expression, hermeneutics of religious change, but maybe the interplay of moral and religious change. That has to do now something with what I said about, or in my book, The Sacredness of the Person, that sometimes moral change is inspired by religious traditions. But sometimes also the religious traditions change because of a change in, let's say, widespread moral intuitions. So certain understandings of God are no longer plausible to believers because of moral change, so to speak. None of us accepts that 7 generations from a misdeed, people will be punished by God because their ancestors did that or something like that. So my suggestion would be, and this is where we end, that instead of maybe talking about the hermeneutics of religious change and treating modernity as a somehow usable category, maybe we should discuss specific cases of the interplay between moral and religious change. And Charles's example of abolitionism would be a perfect example for what I have in mind.
Good. Some quick responses to that. First of all, I don't think that we're, the way we've been pursuing this, we're invested in talking about modernity as the overarching concern here. Really, it's more specific kinds of developments in, you might say, the world system, the global warming and the accompanying rise of some sort of at least light green sensibility. This is one of the major areas in which different religious traditions have been trying to adjust to contemporary conditions and go back to their own traditions, go through some process of construction or reinterpretation of their sources. That would be one example, but we can talk about a range of technological challenges. Craig has brought up artificial intelligence and a number of the technological shit. I know this is a concern of Joas as well. Or we can talk about economic globalization. There are a number of specific, massive, systemic changes that we can talk about without trying to theorize them as features of a single form of modernity or modernization. But back to your third point on the focusing on the interplay of moral and religious change. Great. How do we do that? How do we study that, or how do we engage in comparative study of this interplay in let's just say in the Abrahamic traditions? Any thoughts on that, Hans, or Tomas? I want to get you in too. Yeah.
You want me to respond, or you want?
Go ahead, Hans, and then Tomas, you're in the queue. Yeah.
I mean, as I said, when I made a few remarks about my current interests or long-term interests, for me, a crucial component of moral change is change in the direction of moral universalism. And I could illustrate that now, what I said before about religions, namely that religious traditions, although the axial religious traditions clearly are a main source, a main inspiration for moral universalism, in their existing forms are often considered, and rightly so, not being universalist enough, so that maybe in secular movements, religious traditions are confronted with universalist challenges. That the Catholic Church, for example, considering itself truly universal, clearly was not truly universal, was Eurocentric, Italiano-centric, or whatever. For example, in the 19th century, the colonies represented not by bishops from the colonies, but bishops from the colonizing powers and so on. So there is a claim to be universalist, but also a challenge from within the tradition or outside the tradition to be truly universalist. And for me, that could be a fruitful perspective for looking at opposition to existing doctrines and organizational forms that come from within the tradition themselves or come from outside, and drive the tradition either in the direction of increasing universalism or of a kind of reparticularization. So we defend the existing structures, we defend the existing doctrines, because what they want us to become, that is different from what we have been all the time and what we truly find the particularity that is of existential relevance for us. And all this, in a comparative, and in that sense, now in an empirical universalist sense, namely, this is not just a matter of the self-reform of the Catholic Church, but there are parallel problems in Protestant traditions, in Islamic traditions, and so on.
Yeah, I'm certainly interested in those parallels. Tomas.
We are closing an international research project based on our Czech Christian Academy, Faith and Beliefs of Non-Believers. Some of you participated on this. And now I've got a feeling that a very important thing is that, or perhaps I can say so, that I have more and more doubts and skepticism towards using these classical categories, believers, non-believers, religious, non-religious, atheist, and so on. I think that there's an increasing number of people, they have this mixture, this dialectic of belief and non-belief, and that the number of people, they are identified with the religious, with the religions, and also this strictly atheist, the number of those are decreasing. And I think we should reflect more this phenomenon of people. They are in the same time believers and non-believers. This dialectic between faith and doubts. Yes, there is this concept of people, they are spiritual but non-religious. I don't know if it is the best key to understand this phenomenon, but I think this phenomenon is very, very important, and that we still use these categories, believers, atheists, and I think they are no more relevant. to understand the spiritual scene of today, we should perhaps invent some new categories.
Well, Tomas, if we dispense with the distinction between believers and non-believers, or religious and non-religious, do we have to dispense with the category of religious traditions? Are you putting yourself out of a job here? No, but seriously, is that a consequence of what you're suggesting, that maybe these older categories of religions or religious traditions might not be getting the job done?
It's something analogous to this multiplicity of religious identity. And the people, they are saying, I'm a Jew, but also a Buddhist, and so. And I think that analogous to this is this phenomenon, believers and non-believers. Many people say, yes, I am believer, but I'm not believer, but. And I think this phenomenon is so increasing, and we should reflect it.
Okay. We do have, we've been at it for close to 2 hours. We did have a short break on the provisional schedule. Why don't we break for 10 minutes now? Coffee break, bathroom break, what have you, and then we'll just we'll continue the discussion on the hour. And anyone who would like to check in can use the raise hand function, I think, under reactions. All right, good. You can sign up. Yeah.
Excuse me, how long do you expect we will work?
I was planning to work until noon. So that's 1 more hour after we reconvene. That's noon DC time. Okay. Can you be with us? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Charles, are you doing any traveling these days?
I just came back from a very big, quite a big trip to Europe now. So I got a terrible cold.
Sounds like cold.
Sorry to hear that, but you seem pretty hale, generally speaking.
I got more than a cold over this very interesting trip.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of positive things out of the trip as well as negative things. Okay, so I'll see you all in 10 minutes.
Okay, all right, we'll be back in a few.
Some people have the trick of substituting their name for their picture, but I'll just empty my.
Okay. All right. You can turn off your video. Yeah.
No.
If I turn off the video, do it.
No need. No need.
Okay.
Yeah, just leave
No
it.
need?
No need.
Yeah.
No need. Just leave it as it is. Thomas, how's the weather in the Prague?
So it's a little snow and quite cold now.
Well, just you mentioned believer, non-believer. That's I'm the one of them. So how do you categorize me in that sense?
No, it is this. It is this.
Yeah.
Meeting of traditions and attitudes, and perhaps this is spirituality. It's perhaps the category.
Yeah, because Tony one time asked me, "Oh, who are you? You know, you've been working with George so long. What is your religion?" I said, "I have 2 religious influence on me. One is my mother's Buddhism, and the other one is McLean's Catholicism. So I don't know how to categorize myself, or label myself."
Are you sure that George was Catholic?
I don't know. Universalism? Yeah, well, probably a mixture of ecumenical. Yeah, so that's an interesting question.
Yes, it is this problem of the Catholicity. And I would like to speak about it perhaps later. That I have also one idea for perhaps a new project. What are the consequences of this synodal principle of synodality, or this transformation of the church in the synodal way? What are the consequences for ecumenism and inter-religious cooperation? If the church should be really the common way, so we should include some, we should invite also the others for this common way. So I think if the principle of synodality will be not just something which is concerning the Roman Catholic Church, but it is really invitation, a universal invitation. So we should reflect these consequences for a deeper ecumenism and cooperation between religions in context with this idea of the common way, of this synodal way.
That's really interesting. Is synodality a principle or even a method that can go beyond the Catholic Church and be open to non-believers, to other traditions?
Yes, absolutely. And I think sometimes the Pope is speaking also about it, because there were some echoes from other religions. Yes, we also need some common way, and so it is one. And the second, the consequences of this synodality for the civil society, inspiration for the political scene, the democratization of church in Protestantism was an influence also the democratization of the society. So perhaps this synodality should be some inspiration for this political love, as Francis is speaking, this political love. For this political culture. So what is the synodality also in this political culture, to go together?
Tomas is suggesting that the principle of synodality, at least in principle, can extend well beyond the Catholic Church and engage other populations, other communities.
I mean, synodality is the central principle of the Eastern churches. The Catholic Church never used it very, very clearly, but it is it's the oldest almost principle of the Christian churches. But and of course, basically it's consultation and collective consensus, and those are central principles of democratic decision making, certainly. So it's a democratic principle, of course.
But I think it's something deeper also. It's not only this, yes? There's also the invitation of the others for this common way. There was a interesting Czech Protestant bishop in the 17th century, Comenius, and he wrote the book, Consultatio Catholica ad emendandum rerum humanarum, the Catholic, the common consultation for for deepening of the human affairs. And it was his idea during the religious wars in the 17th century that there should be some ecumenical council And to put all people together, he spoke also about Muslims at that time. And we should have a consultation how to cultivate the future of mankind. And I think this is the synodal principle, the common view. Yeah?
But this is what I meant precisely by global civil society. This is precisely reality at the level of transnational, not to fix everything within churches, within nations, but transnational synodality.
Yeah.
So that's my question, Jose. Your proposition for global civil society is similar as a Chinese government, a global community. In a shared community.
I don't trust the slogans of the Chinese government in global community.
That's what they are talking about. The similar as what you are talking.
No, it's not. I'm talking of transnational, not forcing the focus on national, but not international, but transnational, precisely cutting across, crossing boundaries. This is what I'm talking. And synodality crossing boundaries. This is precisely what. Yes.
The crossing of boundaries is ambiguous. I mean, if I talk from the experience of Africa, you know, the crossing of boundaries, even in the name of solidarity, sometimes solidarity is heavy. It is, it can be very threatening as well. How do you create the environment for international solidarity to be as friendly as it should be? And I think this is my challenge when I'm thinking of extending. In Africa, we often talk about Ubuntu as a way of contributing to the global world, but I mean we struggle with that as well. So there's always going to be, I think, universalizing forces, and I think some of them can be very positive, and yet at the same time, almost like a paradox, that some of those universalizing forces can actually be particularizing, or creating conditions for particularity.
If there are particular empires, particular empires that universalize, yes, of course. So the question is localization, right? How, sure.
Well, David, you mentioned that the way that you've been approaching some of these topics with your colleagues in Zimbabwe makes use of the idea of social imaginaries. How do you do that, or how do you incorporate the idea of social imaginaries into this problem of promoting solidarity across boundaries? National imaginaries, global imaginaries?
It's a very difficult project, because it's an attempt to say that are there any crevices that we could begin to utilize to create relationships across many different kinds of divisions that have been caused, you know, class, ethnicity, religion. Because if you think, say, of Christianity in Africa, it has brought in a lot of divisions. I mean, the different Christian traditions divided African peoples, even of the same ethnicity, for example. And so the idea of social imaginary is the idea of saying, are there values out there that could begin to be put together to begin this process of relationships across divisions? And what are they saying? What are those values saying with regard to who we are, who we ought to be, and how we relate to others? And that's what it is. But I think, you know, some of the points that have been made with regard to the power of capitalism and the power of political boundaries that have been imposed on Africans, context. All those are things that we have to grapple with. At the moment, I think a lot of African nation states have recognized that the state itself is not adequate in dealing with issues around its people, its boundaries. And therefore, that's why you are beginning to see these regional bodies coming up, SADC and ECOWAS and so on. And then also beginning to see this attempt to have a kind of African, African constituency, as it were. So it's very difficult. But what I have been trying to do is to say, let's start from our local situations. Is there something we can say about creating the so-called Zimbabwe? What new narratives can we say that could help each group that has been forced under what we call Zimbabwe to begin reaching out and saying our history is connected to other people's history? And now that we are part of Zimbabwe, how can we contribute to create a social imaginary that could work for us, as it were?
Okay, yeah, it's an ongoing question to what extent social imaginaries can actually be created or engineered in that way. Thank you all for rejoining and for your generosity in sticking with us through the hour. We were just talking in the break with Tomas Halik about the idea that the Catholic Church is grappling with right now of synodality, and the question of whether that might be a principle or a framework that extends beyond the church or beyond the Catholic community, and that can embrace other types of groups. Catherine, I wonder what you might think about that idea as a kind of comparative theologian about this, about whether synodality. The problem with synodality is that it sounds very Christian. It sounds very Catholic, even the very term.
Greek. It's very Greek, not Catholic.
It's very Greek. It sounds very Orthodox, doesn't it? Now that you mention it. But is there a principle, even a method, in the synodal, the program of synodality that could be interreligious or even go beyond religion? I'm just curious, Catherine, if you have any thoughts off the top of your head about that.
Well, first, I think I agree that using that term is maybe not the most constructive when you engage other religious traditions, because it has, whether it's originally Christian or Catholic or not, it has come to be associated so much with the Catholic Church and its process now of synodality. So I'm not sure how different it would be from the very simple term dialogue that we have been using for such a long time, where you engage other religious traditions in a constructive way in order to find both commonalities and differences and learn from one another and so on. So I think I'm not sure synodality adds much to the classical understanding of relations between religions based on mutual respect and dialogue.
Okay, Tomas, how would you respond to that? What's distinctive about synodality?
Yeah, I think that the synodality is more than dialogue. It is a common way. So there are two elements. It is the way. It's something dynamic. Some progress, some development, and I think this archetype of a way is very important for other religions, for the Eastern religions, and so Tao and everything is a way. So Christianity as a way. At the beginning, before the Christians were called Christians in Antiochia, the people called them the people of the way. And if the first Christian were asked what it is, what you are bringing, it is a new religion or a new philosophy, and say, no, it's a way. It's a way of following the man who said, I am the way. And I think this dynamism that is very important, that is not just the religion, but the way. And I think there is something which could put together the different traditions. The spiritual way, it's in Buddhism also, it's a way, and so, and I think it's the common way to go together, to go. So it means the dynamism, but also the sharing, to go together in respect, and not just a dialogue, it's more to go together, to accompany each other. I think it's a step behind just the dialogue. That there's Vatican II is this idea of dialogue and aggiornamento. It was the accepting, it was integrating the idea of modernity, but now we are in this postmodern global pluralistic society, and it means something more than just the dialogue. And I think this idea of this common way that we go together and we go towards some eschatological goal. It's that we are not in the goal, that we are a community of pilgrims, and the others are also the pilgrims, and we respect. And so this is what I think it's inspirative.
Thank you. Pilgrimage is certainly a nice cross-religious category, as is accompaniment, I think we can say. Yipping. Oh, okay. I think there's somebody who showed up in the office there. So I don't want to, all I want to do at this point is mention the two broad points of convergence that struck me. One about preserving local forms of community, including language communities, against large-scale domineering forces, economic or otherwise. That was a theme that came across in several of the talking points that were submitted to me. And then also this question of the realities that remain firmly in our consciousness of the pandemic and of the current war in Ukraine. Do those spark significant shifts in the work, the broader work of philosophy and intercultural dialogue that we're involved in? Bob, you're checking in, and I invite anybody. I'm just going to put those 2 points out there, and we're just going to have an open discussion for the rest of our time. Anyone who would like to check in, please either raise your hand on the screen or use your little hand icon in the reaction section. Bob, go ahead.
Well, first, I would like to present a metaphysical hypothesis.
Okay.
I'm a metaphysician, so that's my privilege here. And it's this, that to be a thing is to consist of conditional components and essential components. And it's to be a harmony of these. The conditional components of religion include having a social structure, and among the social structures are religious traditions and counter traditions and counter traditions and so forth. But there are also other conditions that are in religion. For instance, the psychological. If you think about the writings of Soren Kierkegaard, well, that's an important Western one. The essential components of religion, I think, are those having to do with the pursuit of ultimacy. And in my view, this is my hypothesis now, ultimacy consists in saying that the world that we live in, including religion, is all created. And that means that the creator cannot be a substance, but has to be an act that has no reality prior to or above or apart from the creation. And so it's luck that gets us here from what we can view. Now, this leads to important consequences. Most of the speakers here have been speaking about the social conditions of religion, and those are important. But we have some fairly deep divisions about what the social conditions are. For instance, Catherine Cornille and I have been debating for a number of years her use of the term home tradition. And you know that the Roman Catholics have a strong home tradition, including synodism, but also including all sorts of other things. That tradition is internally self-contradictory, and one always picks from it and moves from there. I would say, on the contrary, that when we do comparisons, we should start with the subject matter and see how the conditions relate to the subject matter. So that means with religion, we start with ultimacy and see how the conditions relate to ultimacy. Now, of course, we always have our own backgrounds, but the backgrounds are not a tradition to which we would be faithful, however we interpret it, but rather a tradition that needs to prove itself in claiming to understand the conditions of religion. So I would want to say that our conversation up until now, particularly having to do with the social imaginary, is just one part of religion. And you don't need to be religious to discuss that. You just need to be interested in the topic. Whereas those people who are also religious might not give much weight to the social commentary, imaginary. And that's my contribution.
Thank you very much. Okay, a metaphysical hypothesis. I have Joseph and then Tony in the queue. Joseph, take it away.
Yeah, my comment is about the question of religious cognition. Is there a special way by which we have religious experiences? Because this is very fundamental, you know, in terms of what we can make out of religious experiences, whether they can be universal, particular, or what. We this whole idea of religious cognition, what is it founded in, and how do we elaborate on this? How do we understand it? I think this is very fundamental, an epistemological dimension to the discussion of, you know, religion. If we're able to understand the processes of religious cognition, then we might be able to know what might be possible, you know, in terms of transcultural discourses, and in terms of the universal and particular, and how to combine them. So I think that dimension, the dimension of cognition, intuition, what it's founded in, what level of knowledge can be got out of intuition, for example, is something that needs to be incorporated, possibly in this kind of project. That's my observation.
Good, thank you. So the epistemological dimension. Tony.
I don't know about you, I always find it hard to remember what I was about to say when I listen to somebody. So if I start talking, hopefully I'll remember what I was going to say. But I think the previous point about cognition, I think for me is very important, because I'd want to throw in the concept of discernment in religious cognition and cognition more broadly. For me, discernment is a mode of insight. Obviously, we've got Lonergan's fantastic work. I'm sure many of us have worked through that incredible piece of epistemology, really, isn't it? But I think the question of insight and discernment is key in the conversation you've launched, Bill, because the category you've used there to guide us in the discussion is the hermeneutics of change. And I think when we're talking about the nature of change, clearly it can be good or bad. I mean, staying where you are can be good, changing can be good. You judge whether it's good or bad by insight or discerning. Is this a good change? Is it a bad change? Better to stay where we are? Is it better to change? And I think one of the challenges we've had in our, certainly in the Western civilization, that's big enough to talk for, isn't it? But the question of the notion that change is almost necessarily bad. Take it from Plato. That's exactly what the forms are. The fact they don't change makes them the supreme good. So everything that changes is less, is imperfect, is not what we should do. It's bad. And I think that has impregnated religious traditions in doctrinal senses. We're working through at the moment in the Church of England the change to allow marriage for same-sex partners or blessing and so on. And the debate is around any form of change is a betrayal of the biblical teaching for those who oppose it. And I think what they're plugging into is the notion that change is of its nature bad. And I think that lacks a concept of insight or discernment, which is not simply a religious category. I think it goes way beyond any tradition and any religious tradition or secular tradition. It's a human capacity to discern when you should change and when you should stay the same. And I think that links to the question of universalism, because it strikes me, if we are to move towards a sense of greater universalism, and that would be an aspiration I think most of us, if not all of us, would have, we need categories of discernment of what is the better direction of change. If change is not necessarily bad or necessarily good, you do need a set of rules, hermeneutical principles, if you will, to facilitate accepting or rejecting change, and not simply a priori presuming changes of its nature bad. I think that goes deep in the Western philosophical tradition, Plato and so on. And I think we need to move beyond that in order to rethink political constellations today. I mean, one of the things I think about politics at the moment is people lost faith in bigger political institutions. And so did, I think, right, we need to reinforce our nation state, nothing wrong in that, but because the other seemed pie in the sky, it seemed unrealistic, whereas we knew what our nation state could deliver, and it was an agent in a politically chaotic world in the COVID context. But we lacked a vision to not annul the nation state, but just expand its ambition to universalism, to moral universalism. And that, to me, it seems to be sort of people like us who think about these things. I think that's one of the tasks of the life of thinkers today.
Bob, a quick response?
Well, I just want to emphasize the first of all that Tony's right about the importance of change, but it takes place in so many, many different areas. So you have changes in religious traditions, changes in social conditions, but consider the psychological changes that are taking place. We live in a kind of skeptical age, at least among my friends. Many of them are skeptics, but that's different from the skeptical age of Montesquieu, for instance. And it's very important for us to keep track of all these changes at once while we're trying to figure out where the religious changes ought to go.
Good, thanks. Tony, once a Jesuit, always a Jesuit. Craig, I hope you're with us right now. I'm going to just invite your responses or observations so far about this line of inquiry.
Craig said that he will join us later. That he had to.
Oh, he said he'll join later. Oh, okay, I missed that. All right, good. Okay, who else would like to jump in? The floor is open. We had a accompaniment, discernment. I liked the. I mean. Tony touched on the question of the hermeneutical principles for evaluating good or bad change that we might be able to point to in different traditions or sub-traditions, but I think we've gone well beyond that in the discussion so far. Joao, what's on your mind?
I'd just like to say something about what might be called the virtue of the small things, or the importance of the small things. I think José and then Hans and then Tony and others, Charles, etc. I think we are facing here a kind of option that I don't think is an option of exclusiveness, but of integration. So I'd like to make this point. For example, dealing with the issue of the development of an transnational civil society, which is certainly needed, much needed, urgently needed. But at the same time, I think we need to be careful when we propose this so that we don't dismiss something that has been, has caused problems, some of them very big. We can look, for example, to the present war, the assault of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, can be seen as a consequence of bad nationalism, of deformation of the national spirit. And therefore, even though, I don't know Russia, I will not say that Russia is a national state per definition, but here is the reason of the problem. On the other hand, we all, at least I certainly do, are impressed, amazed at the capacity, the ability, the resourcefulness, obviously with the international help, which is crucial and will be even more crucial in the coming days and weeks and months, of the Ukrainian people. And one of the results of this war is that Ukraine is more Ukraine now than it ever was in history, I would say. Why? Because it is the consequence of this war, of this aggression, is the development of national consciousness that will have an impact. I think that it will have a major impact in the configuration of the national idea, and even of what remains of the national state at least in Europe, for the coming decades. So my point is this: perhaps, and taking the word discernment from Tony, perhaps we need to discern in a more systematic way, dealing with the limits and the possibilities and impossibilities, the logic and the contradictions of what is entailed in substantial parts of the human experience, one of which is, of course, religion, even institutionalized religion or religions or communities of faith, and politically what we call the national state, because the best things we have in terms of an international formation of an international commonwealth, of an international conscience, came out of the nation state, because it was in the nation state that the rule of law was first developed and applied. And I think the problem is that we are still very far away from a universal application and development of the rule of law. And therefore, we have all those many contradictions. So my suggestion is that we keep an eye and an ear attentive to the good possibilities, the not yet developed or well-developed or sufficiently developed resources that we can find in particularity. Be it psychological, sociological, economical, and religious. So that, if I understood well what Catherine was saying before, the ideal and the goal of dialogue might be more substantiated, so that we might dialogue out of the difference, out of the complementarities that bring us together instead of leading us apart. So that was my thoughts that I was developing during the conversation, and I thank you for your
good. Quick follow-up for you, Joel. You mentioned bad nationalism. In other words, the proposition that we need to make judgments about good nationalism, bad nationalism. This, among other things, is a task for religious traditions that have to position themselves with respect to the nation. So it's a question within traditions, but also outside traditions, how we develop those criteria for bad nationalism and
if I may, Bill, thank you for that. I mean, if I regarding the other point you mentioned about the implications of the present war, I mean, this particular war, there are other wars going on too, is that we read the implications, the religious implications of this. I think the major scandal of this present war of Russia against Ukraine is the going back by many years, by 60, maybe under 200 years, to a social situation in which a major religion, a major religious community is not distancing itself sufficiently from an unjust and illegitimate and irrational war that is taking place in there. So I just wanted to make this point because I agree entirely with what you said, Bill. Religion, I think one of the role of religion is to be able to exercise discernment, applying it even to what is happening on the political realm. And perhaps we need more of a criticism of what Peterson in the 30s called the danger of political theology. So political theology in the bad sense of the word.
Okay. Who you checked in briefly, and then we have Gail. Ping, go ahead.
I just want to share something. When Bob mentioned about the ultimacy, and Johanna sent her points talking about the original Tao. So I want to share that with you. And probably Johanna could say something about the ultimacy in terms of Tao. Can you see it?
Yeah, we have that up. Johanna, would you like to introduce or relate the discussion to the talking point that you said?
Thank you so much, Hui Ping, to mention this. Actually, when Professor Neville talking about the ultimacy and the metaphysical presumption, and I'm thinking a question: how to define a religious community or a religious society, and which, different from so-called society. Whether we will meet a society, a religious society without religion. That means, when I read Bill's, the question, the hermeneutics of religious change, another question come to my mind is what's the difference between religious change and religious transformation? So change means you can, the moving from a community, the moving from one place to the other place, for example, from China to Canada, but there's no transformation probably, because transformation means just like Kierkegaard mentioned, that is a 3 level from aesthetics, morality to religious. So Vincent has published. Vincent leave a book. Then I help publish this book, Metaphysics, and talking about the humanity and ultimate reality. In the last chapter, you're talking about the divine ultimate reality. So for him, for Vincent, he said about when we're talking about the metaphysical experience, we cannot avoid this part. It's a so-called ultimate concern. So today, when we're talking about capital sin or Anthropocene, means we use the too much human approach, rational approach to confine or to limit the possibility of the encountering with the divinity, divine world. So that's why I put the first the question is about the issue of hermeneutics, because hermeneutics, as Paul Ricoeur say, that it is a science of meaning through understanding. So where we can meet the religious religious encountering among different culture, that should be text or image. Text only through the text and image, and we have the chance to see a different way encountering with the divine world or divinity, ultimate reality. So I just use Mansu's word, the poetic reading, as a principle of textual interpretation and understanding. I think Professor Neville should have explained that. Actually, it's Mansu say 以意逆志. It means reading is a process of tracing back to the origin of Tao or logos, embodied in the recent text. It means the text is not although there's an author, but when the author write this text, it should be first encounter with the original. So when we read the text, it's not to read the understanding or the intention of the person. The personal, the human understanding about the divine world or the ultimate reality. Actually, it's the ultimate reality reveal itself through the text. So that's why I say I think in this way, we have to make difference between culture, text, and the willing of God. I would say the text could be the trace of the ultimate reality. You know, when he although the ultimate exists everywhere, but it is invisible. So only through a text, in different culture, and the image in different culture, then we may have the chance to sharing the religious experience relating to the ultimate reality. Okay, that's my simple.
Good. Yes, thank you very much, Johanna. So Bob, I take it that the text would fall under one of the conditions in your hypothesis rather than one of the essential features of religion.
And I would say it would be one of the conditions, but it could play a role in any one of the various other conditions. So a text like Lao Tzu's could that is for us a spiritual matter, but for the Chinese, I think at the time it was advice to a king about how to rule correctly, and I've found that in teaching the Tao Te Ching, just about every student, after reading it and discussing it, goes home and cleans up his room and then finds some running water to walk by. It's something that is deeply personal, and it's pretty hard to bring them back to seeing how that's really, that was a subject for the king.
Okay.
So, and I think that that's probably true for any text. It can be read in a whole variety of different ways. If you think about how Freud read texts and religion and mythology and other areas, drawing out consequences that none of the people in those other areas had thought of.
Good. Gail, you've been very patient. You're up, and then Will next.
Well, thanks a lot. So I guess my background as a conference organizer was showing up I was listening to everything and saying, now, how are we going to come up with a theme for the pre-conference from all of these wonderful comments? And I kept trying to.
You had an inspiration, right?
Well, so my job was, I was trying to glean together what I thought is, we need something broad enough that it could subsume some of the more specific topics, or this more specific topics might be a panel or a plenary, but that we needed something more overarching. So for example, you've mentioned war in Ukraine a few times, and I just wanted to say, I don't think that's a viable theme for the whole pre-conference, even though, I mean, it's a terribly important thing, and we all care about it, but it's not the only injustice in the world. It's not the only place where people are dying. I mean, it's important, but and also, who knows, August 2024, the war in Ukraine is going to go through a lot of changes between now and then. And we just hope we still have a world in August 2024, that we don't all, go up in a nuclear exchange. So I definitely think we should make room in our conference for a discussion of that, but I didn't think it should be the overarching theme. So I kept thinking, what could be an overarching theme? And I was thinking about how your theme for this year's gathering was social imaginaries and social transformation, and I thought of social transformation as a nice big umbrella term, and I wondered if we could somehow wed it in some way to some of the sub themes so that it could be a little more specific. I didn't know if it should be, I don't know, religions or traditions in social transformation. In some ways that would capture some of the discussions we've had here, but I'm sure other people might be even better than me at coming up with this larger term. I did say I do like the idea of, you know, us coming together on some kind of a unified global scale to address problems like environment. And I know you earlier said you're working on environment, but once again, I wouldn't want the whole pre-conference to be on environment, but if we had an embracing term like social transformation and then had a section devoted to environment, one on, you know, war and injustice, one on, you know, environment, that that might help. I mean, I think it's true that the nationalisms of today, the governments, the individual governments haven't come through and met their public promises about how they're going to address the environment. But the problem isn't only nation states, because a lot of the problem is global transnational corporations that are doing their best to make sure that the nation state allows them to pursue, you know, oil and gas at the expense of the environment. And I think some of the international groups like the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, he's always up there saying, we have to meet our promises. So it's more that the United Nations, it's not robust enough and the nations aren't coming through on their promises enough. So I don't know if that's the reason why we have to turn to civil society, but as you all know, civil society on occasions is putting pressure on these global institutions, whether it's the UN or other global business and national COP27, whatever.
Well, RVP is, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say RVP is a global civil society organization.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, but I mean, I think we can't take over from the United Nations. We have to like,
well, all right, if you say so.
Work with them. But so social transformation, I thought of that as a key theme, but anyway, that was my 2 cents so far, but I'm sure others can come up with a better umbrella term.
Thank you. Thank you for the practical considerations. Will.
Yeah, thank you. So part of what you know, what Gail was just talking about also sort of rings a bell for me, because I guess we have to be sort of practical about this. And I'd noted that I suppose in many of our previous pre-conference meetings before the World Congress, the emphasis has been on culture, right? And so it's this, you know, Center for Culture and Values. So I don't know if that's would assist us in picking a theme or not, given the tenor of this discussion. But I just want to flag, I think one of the issues, I think that maybe pulls on a few things that people have talked about. You know, Bob talks about universalism. People talk about trying to, you know, break away from the, you know, either break away from or at least go beyond just talking about nation states and talking about something more global. And I'm reminded that a couple of years ago, the RVP organized a Zoom conference with one of the universities in China. And the big interest there was global governance. And in sort of the irony of talking about this was that when we're talking about global governance, COVID hit, and it's a global pandemic, and you figure everyone in the globe is going to be interested. And what's the response? What they called vaccine nationalism. You know, that almost immediately what happened in response was everyone tried, Canada was an example, tried to get as much of the vaccine as possible to deal with local issues. And so, you know, you sort of see this concern, you know, in China and other places about going, you know, not being restricted to the local. And the response seems to have been, well, no, get as much of this stuff for ourselves, save the local populations. And so when I talked in that little note to you about friends and enemies, I mean, people who are our friends suddenly became our rivals, or worse. Again, even within many countries, the level of demonization of ethnic communities that came out of the pandemic. So, the Asian Canadians who were sort of demonized in Canada, or, in relation to what? There's nothing objective there, but there was that kind of turn. And so again, who are our friends, who are our enemies, and that kind of thing. And so that kind of polarization that happens maybe in moments of crisis, it's not that people say we're all going to work together to solve the problem. It's like we're going to retrench, and it becomes sort of, as Schmidt would say, a kind of friend-enemy type of division. And so, I see on the one hand the importance of the possibility of universalism. We've all talked about that kind of thing, but I wonder at times how Pollyanna-ish this is when we look at cases where there were movements towards global governance and that kind of thing, and suddenly a global crisis hits, and there's a massive retrenchment. Now, that's a bit of an exaggeration, I admit, because the World Health Organization is doing things globally and so on, but there was that kind of retrenchment. And so Pope Francis talked about 2 or 3 years ago about building bridges. But it seemed as if the response to crisis was not to build a bridge. The response to the crisis was to build a wall, which is exactly what he was opposed to. So maybe that's a long-winded way of saying that I think that at some point, I think we have to interrogate this idea of the possibility of universalism, or the impossibility or the possibility rather of crossing borders or crossing boundaries. And then questions like, where does culture fit within that kind of arrangement? So it was just a kind of reflection, I think, picking up on Gail's point about trying to find something that's practicable. But I think that also addresses what I take to be this great irony for me of the pandemic, and that is we didn't respond globally. In a way, we didn't respond globally, or the global response was, I think, overshadowed by a lot of very anti-global responses.
Thank you. Yeah, we looked at this discussion to provide helpful suggestions for specific events like the pre-conference, but also for overarching ideas that can, beyond the conference, as we move into our next phase, can continue to provide some guidance. Craig, what do you think?
Well, I missed a half hour of the discussion, but what I came back to was still what I had been thinking about when we left off. And I was thinking in ways very closely related to Hans Joas's comments and his partial acceptance, partial uncertainty about José's. And so we're still talking about universalisms, what works. So let me quickly give my thoughts on this. First, it seems to me there's absolutely no reason to think that global challenges are met necessarily or solely by global responses. Just because the challenge is at a global scale does not mean the response has to be globally organized. There will be a variety of different kind of actors at different scales with different sorts of organization that respond. I think more global solidarity and dialogue are good, but they're always mediated among these various kinds of different structures. And we can talk about civilizations and religions, and we can talk about states and marks. There are things happening at intermediate scales that are the conditions of producing response. If you take nation states, we ought not just to be asking, can we move beyond the nation state, but how do we get nation states to behave well in relation to these global challenges. We have the most voice inside nation states. We should be using that voice to get our nation states to behave better globally, not just imagining that we should get rid of the nation states, which would amount to imagining that capitalist markets should govern everything, which may not be the goal that we're after. But in fact, if we ask what are the most, quote, universal things in the world, most universal features or unifiers in the contemporary world, well, first on the list might be markets, and the second on the list might be material conditions like climate change or pandemics. So the world as a whole, it gets knit together by markets, by pandemics, and by climate change, none of which I think represent the ideal of solidarity and the good that we're after. And so the question is, how do we relate to those kinds of unifiers with other kinds of structures that enable action? In this notion of the universal, though, and these are, and obviously those, you could say those are all general but not universal. And I'm going to come to that because I think universal gets treated in a bunch of ways. Is it a common denominator? Is it lateral connections that are made, like markets forge connections everywhere? Is it the equivalence of individuals? All human beings share a common definition, whether in terms of soul or whatever other way of thinking about it, but understood laterally. All of those are different from thinking in terms of a higher good or transcendence. And trying to conceive the universal in relation to a notion of higher good is very different than trying to conceive it in relation to lateral connections of any kind. This suggests, among other things, that progress towards the universal isn't going to be simply progress towards enlarging lateral connections. That doesn't mean building civil society organizations isn't a good idea, but it doesn't in and of itself automatically get at that. Among other things, not all civil society organizations are good. Lots of international civil society connections are on different sides from each other, so they are not at least embodying the same good. I wonder if we might want to think about different projects of world making, sometimes world saving, sometimes resisting other people's world making projects. I'm just picking up on this term, which I didn't make up, to think about the fact that we have reorganizations of the world, not just the world system of nation states and corporations, but worlds. So Chinese, when we speak of what's going on in the Ukraine is embedded in transformations of world making and resistance to change in worlds that range from China through the issues of petroleum infrastructures and economies that are linking Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan into OPEC countries in the Middle East, to the former Soviet Union and the challenges there, and Russia within it, and Russia's various features and orthodoxy. So the point of this is to say that making a world here is never just a religious project or a civilizational project. It is those in relationship to other kinds of organization that are knitting these worlds together. Was true in the axial age and is true now. So you can't get a grip on it simply hermeneutically inside a religious tradition. You can't get a grip on it ignoring tradition and traditionalism and the ways in which people try to either save or innovate within traditions. Last bit, this is not simply global then. This is about reorganized connections and particularities. So if we were to think, say, of Africa or of Asia or Eurasia or any of these regional solidarities, there are world-making projects. There are projects of trying to shape the material and the cultural conditions in which people live in ways that support their subjectivities. This can't be simply global civil society, partly because there are such powerful actors, states and corporations, And there are systems that are hugely influential. So the organizations in various senses in all these things need to be understood as embedded in relationship to projects of making the world this way or that way, or trying to save the way you had it, or trying to stop that way, even if you don't know where you want to go. And these are all projects, even when not consciously conceptualized as projects, and they all have, if you will, an infrastructure in organizations, in culture, in solidarities, and that is changing around the world. It's an upheaval. So to look at world making might be a way to think about this.
All right, thank you for those very rich comments. We're pretty much up against our planned time to knock off, so I don't want to keep you any longer than necessary. Jose and Karim, you had both. Karim, did you check in earlier? I guess I'll just solicit your final comments, and then we'll adjourn until those of you who are able and willing to join us in a couple of hours can come back for our business meeting. Karim?
Thank you, William. About the notion of change, with the observation that religions are not doing a good job at changing when so much change is taking place around them. We recall the irony that religions were originally a major change, which they brought about in their environment and in societies, which sometimes became across continents. But today they seem to be groping towards a way of keeping change at bay. And in fact, the dominant forces that Charles Taylor and others have underlined are so powerful and overwhelming that religions and religious traditions are being hollowed out and becoming flat and without any depth, and becoming a simulacrum or a reflection of what they used to be. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to see what role they can play for affecting a new world. And so I'm afraid I have to be pessimistic that the overwhelming transformations taking place, particularly ecological, as well as brought about by the market and consumption, will overwhelm religious attempts to forge some kind of solidarity, even between themselves. And there must be a way in which a new form of what we used to be called religion has to be born that can accommodate and be a reality in a new world. Thank you.
All right. With some trepidation, Jose, we're going to give you the last word.
Not the last, but briefly, I never said that we should go beyond the nation state, and I will never say we should go beyond capitalism. The question is exactly how we can make the nation's state to behave well, and how can we make capitalism to behave well for the global common good. How can we think in terms of the global common good precisely, which is the way of addressing all these global challenges? I didn't say that only global structures can respond to global challenges, but certainly the two systems of global governance we have done very badly in the last 10 years to address most of the global challenges. So the question is, we do need, in addition to this, to create global structures, some of them that can serve both to limit the capitalism and to limit the nation state, the system of the nation state, because obviously the United Nations, that should be the limitation of the nation state, certainly not working. So again, I don't have any solution. My point is we should think how to institutionalize at the level of global society structures that can precisely they can serve this role. To think that we don't need to think in those terms, I think, is denying the reality of the malfunctioning of our global system of governance.
Very good. Okay, well, once again, warmest thanks to all of you for taking the time, especially for those of you for whom this was an inconvenient time. And we're very grateful for the ideas that you submitted, for the interventions, for the discussion today. We'll put together a report of a kind of summary of this meeting that we can distribute to you. And I hope that you'll stay tuned and see what sort of fruit this consultation has borne as we continue with our programming for the pre-conference and for upcoming other conferences and research projects that we'll be coordinating beyond that. So thank you. This meeting is adjourned. I do hope that you, either as a key figure in the leadership or as someone who's maybe has a new interest in the work of the conference, will be back with us at 2 o'clock my time. So in 2 hours, it'll be the same Zoom link. I'll see you then. And a special thanks to the folks who've joined us for the first time. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, I'm sorry I cannot join you because it will be 3
Yes,
o'clock.
I understand. It'll be super late there.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being with us. Hans, great to see you. All the best, and might come drop in on you soon. Tomas, all the best. I very much appreciate the ideas about synodality beyond synodality, and I also look forward to the publication of your Afternoon of Christianity book in English. I hope sometime soon.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you need me in?
No. You've already given us
Okay.
a generous dose of your time. Thanks very much.
But
Bye-bye.
if you have a time, would be great.
Well, thank you very much. I'm afraid I won't be able to join you later, but I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope we can engage again sometime.
Good. Thank
Okay.
you. Yong, are you still with us, or I know it's very late where you are?
Probably he's gone.
Okay. All right.
So good to see you, David,
Yeah.
after all these years, and everyone.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Gail.
Yeah, David,
Yeah,
if you have a time, please do join in the afternoon, okay?
Tony
well,
wants to move to Spain.
It will be close to midnight. And
Oh, we lost.
yeah, I will try and do that.
Okay.
And he's a
but-
busy dean now, I see.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
I can't join the business meeting, so thanks for all the rich contributions and hoping to see you soon somewhere. I don't know where, but possibly Europe, otherwise in other part of the world. So take care and have a nice weekend.
Yeah, thank you for sending the contributions to the business meeting, Peter. That was helpful. Yeah.
My pleasure.
Mhm.
See you.
All right.
All right.
All right. Take care.
See you in the afternoon.
I'm going to end this call.